Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is Airsick Hydra here talking to you about Warhammer Chaosbane. Now, this video is going to be a little bit of a feedback and a discussion video, so if you're still on the fence about the game, wondering about buying it, maybe of some use to discuss really actually what issues the game has in some detail. This is not a review, I've already done one of those, check out the link in the doobly-doo. This is going to be more aimed at feedback, and guys, I'm sharing my views with a idea not to steer the development purely in my own direction, because that doesn't simply happen, but to get you guys talking. Down below in the comments, I would love to see your thoughts. Typically, the stuff I did on Martyr for this, we had some great discussion, feedback, etc., and I know the developers used to read it. They used to find it very useful because it's a little bit less venting and a little bit more, let's say, thoughtful, constructive feedback. So, let's get this show on the road. And perhaps just before I start on the actual feedback, I need to frame this discussion. And this is going to be that my feedback is basically based on my expectation of this game being a hack-and-slash cooperative couch co-op game with some ARPG customization that's largely entry level. That's what I bought. I didn't actually buy this, full disclosure. That's what I came into this game expecting, because that's what I saw in the advertising, that's what I saw in the betas, and therefore that's what my feedback will be based around. And I would freely admit that anyone that has come to this from GD, PoE, and loves those games and wanted this to be like them, your feedback will probably involve more swearing, and that's fine. You may feel a little bit more flustered, and probably understandably so, as there's a large gap and distance between the titles. But anyway, let's get the show on the road. The first thing I want to talk about, and this is mainly just because it's one of the big things for me, is post-campaign motivation to continue playing. Once you've completed the campaign, you're basically levelling up your endgame gear, or getting your endgame gear past the level of 45, although it gets a little stronger right the way up till 50, but you can get yourself geared rather fast. But the question always is, when you're gearing, what are you gearing for and why? Now, we do have a game mode coming at us next week, which is going to be nice to have, and it's going to be with some increased difficulty, which is going to be very nice. We're going to have some extra skills to unlock as well, so this is all looking somewhat promising. But the general post-campaign motivation to gear up even has some issues. One of the issues being that the same gear drops in Chaos 1 and Chaos 5, but it takes a lot longer to do Chaos 5, but it drops gear a little bit more often. It says a lot more often via the percentages, but it really doesn't feel that much. It's still far more effective to do Chaos 1, 2 or 3 at a rate which you can breeze through, and you will generally gear a lot quicker. So my issue is firstly, why would you increase the difficulty? Because there's nothing new you can get on the higher difficulties. And I respect the fact that some players may never want to go to those difficulties, so having gear unique to them might be off-putting to those players that don't like that type of challenge. But what we need is basically a way to measure our EPEAN. So going back to D3, which did this well, is you geared and geared and geared because the Rift system didn't have a ceiling. It kept getting harder. So you needed every little percentage to be the very best Pokemon Master that you could ever be. And it worked really, really well for that. It gave people an incentive to work harder in life. And I have a concern, and a concern is that this new invasion feature will come out and will have a ceiling to it. A ceiling that can be reached rather quick. Once that's reached, any motivation to continue playing goes out the window. And this is why I think this game desperately needs some form of infinitely scaling challenge mode in order to give players a sufficient reason to continue min-maxing. And we'll talk more about itemization, because that really features into this in a moment. But that is something that is currently missing. Currently, we're smacking our heads on the ceiling. We've burst through the ceiling, we're flying way above the canopy right now, because we can just absolutely steamroll through content. And that's going to come down to balancing as well, which we're also going to move to. And I think we'll move to balancing now. Now, we talked about endgame lack of motivation. So, endless feature of some sort, infinite scaling difficulty, I personally think only way you're going to get players to play this long term. There's a bunch of other variables too, obviously, but that for me is a very, very big one, because if you're going to have a constant ceiling somewhere and it's not going to be that high, players are going to smash through it. Let's talk about builds now. Now, if we move on to builds, I think the best way to do is actually to bring up some items here and show you. A build in this game is fairly superficial if we're comparing it to something like even D3. We have a total of 10 items on our character. 10 items. We have a bunch of passives too. Granted, we'll come to those in a moment. These 10 items, 5 of them will form a set, and a set bonus. There is no mixing of different sets. It's 5 out of 5 gives you your bonus. And I understand that visually you don't want characters going around with a bunch of different items that don't fit visually. It wouldn't look very good, and Games Workshop would probably throw a hissy. That's fine. But half of your items straight away go towards one bonus, one skill becoming better and one bonus. Fine. But that gives us 5 more items to customise your character. Necks at the moment will give you a steroid when you use them. It will be mitigation or damage. Rings will do something based on crit, and that is it. So out of your 5 customization items to make your build somewhat unique, you basically have do more damage and take less damage, coming from rings and neck, meaning that the weapons are the only thing that actually shift the build. For this, the weapons generally have one obvious choice, and now we're going to talk about balancing. So firstly, we've highlighted why there is not a lot of build variation in terms of itemization, because not only do the items have pretty narrow stat ranges. Basically, if I pick, let's say, two items that are identical here, we go for, let's play a little game of Snap. Armor piercing, cooldown, health, energy. Armor piercing, crit, health, regen, health. Necklaces have the most variation in terms of stats. When looking at something like armor, it's more or less identical with every drop. There's normally 2 variants of armor. So we've got armor, health, energy, speed. Armor, health, speed, counter. So that's the 2 variants of this item, at least that I can find. I've probably gathered about 300 of items in total that are red. As far as I can tell, most armor pieces have 2 variants. So it doesn't take long to find the one that does more damage, and the other one's probably going to be clearly inferior. In almost all cases, there'll be an obvious choice and one that's just like, well, that makes no sense, so I won't go for that. So it's very quick to get the one you want. There is a little range in stat rolls. So fine, you get slightly better rolls. Don't get better on Chaos 5, I'm almost certain of that, but gearing is just basically over and done with very quick. Then we come to the fact that gearing doesn't matter too much in terms of choice, in terms of your build, because in almost all cases, if we look at the Magnus's gift here, okay, this is the trash clearing item. You gain an additional damage bonus for each enemy nearby that has this effect, 50%. Okay, fine. So once we reach 5 enemies, it becomes better than this, which when a taunted enemy takes damage, takes plus 200%. However, this applies to your whole damn party. This applies just to you. Party, you. Party, you. This is better. And this for me is a bit of an issue with the game's balance state regarding items right now. Is okay, this is better for clearing trash in a solo build, but really this is better. Just in almost every way, as soon as you go co-op, it's like this is your item. Should you go for that? No, you shouldn't. You should go for this. It's just an obvious choice. And the game right now kind of needs, I think, to work on this issue. If this didn't apply to the whole party, you'd have 2 comparable items. And you'd be able to say, okay, well, that's trash clearing that single target. And I could even say, like, okay, maybe in some boss fights, Magnus's gift would be fine to use because it has some trash around it. But this is better. And every character seems to have this issue right now, that some items are just so obviously better that really every build has one build. Every character has one build that you should be picking right now, and that's an issue. That's an issue because this one has the upgraded pistol damage, and it has a banner, which is amazing too, which you put down, and you combine that with the extra damage and this, that, and the other, and this one does vastly more damage than anything else. I've tried about 3 or 4 different builds with this character. This is the only one that does this quantity of damage, but also it's the only one that seems to boost damage to enemies via the whole party. And really the balance state of this game right now just comes down to that. The balance state of this game comes down to everyone needs to have as many abilities as possible to boost damage to that enemy from the whole party. Once you've got 4 people with that, Chaos 5 is ridiculous. Way too easy. Kill any boss in seconds. We can go on Chaos 5 and we can kill the Lord of Change, the hardest boss, before he even gets to attack 3 times in a row. Like he shifts form, goes to his next phase, just about tries to fly up and he's dead already. Why is that? It's purely because of these items. It's the only reason. Because every single person in the party is making everyone else in the party do like 250% more damage. It's ridiculously scaling. Anyone doesn't have those items, they're basically not contributing anything to the group in the same way. So I have some reservations regarding the current balance state, and obviously I'm looking forward to having the comments now about how I've just broken and ruined the game, but that's my observation as to why only this build is viable, because all other builds don't increase the whole party's damage, which is by far the obvious choice. So that's a lot of waffle about this, but at least now hopefully we can share some thoughts on that, if it's a good thing, if it's a bad thing. Like, D3 had this problem too, of loads of items that increased damage by 200%, and once you combine 15 of them together, oh my god, like, you do crazy damage, it's really hard to balance. But it didn't have quite so many items that made everyone else do that much damage, and by everyone in the party, I mean, it did have some, to be fair. It did have some that made stuff, but it didn't seem to have so many issues. Like, balancing this between solo and co-op play is impossible because of these items. Like, if you want to try and make it balanced, you're saying a party of 4 can increase the party's damage tenfold. That's how much you would increase because of these sorts of items, give or take, and I'm just pulling a number off the top of my head. So therefore the enemies have to have 10 times more health in order for it to not be a cakewalk. Maybe even more, because there's also 4 players. Okay, so now we have the issue. This is a big issue, that if a single player, if those 4 people aren't rocking these builds, then they're going to take 10 times longer to do it. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't know what the solution is. I'm just pointing this out as an observation as to why it seems so wildly balanced right now, or unbalanced rather. So let's crack on and keep talking about this. We have the issue of motivation we've discussed. We have builds. I'd like to talk about accessibility to builds as well. Respecking in this game, the God skill tree. Okay, it's a cool tree. I like it. Path of Exile-ish. It's in a cool shape. Cool. It impacts your gameplay a little bit by unlocking new bits and bobs. Shout out here to Sigmar's Blessing Mastered. It really works well for my build. I think it's awesome. I like this. However, if I want to change my build, I need 1,200 of these to change. Now, I'm not actually suggesting right here. I don't think the best solution is to make it cheaper. I think the best solution is to have a wardrobe feature, a loadout feature. And I think having 2 trees, even 3, would be ideal. Because if I'm currently bored of this build, okay, granted, I could have a second character. It's not very inconvenient, though. You're basically saying to someone, well, you're going to need to level someone else to do this. My personal thoughts on this are that why don't you, when you complete the game, actually turn the chest into something that's actually more than just a junkyard? Because all this is somewhere to store trash that you're going to sell at a later date, or maybe sell a set, or keep a set of gear so you don't accidentally sell it. It's the only reason this whole thing is here. Why don't we have a tab? Loadout number 2, and you changed your loadout. You changed your, instead of your boss hunting build, you changed to your other build. Because once these game modes come out, like boss hunt, with a leaderboard, I know boss hunt's already here, but once there's a leaderboard, you're going to have players that are like, okay, well, I want to be really good at that, but I want to be really good at that. It's just going to be a bit... People are going to need multiple characters, and a lot of people won't want multiple characters. For me to change build right now, it's expensive, inconvenient, and I can't do it very often, and this game doesn't have many builds. So I would strongly, strongly suggest making that more accessible, because if you're only going to have 3 armor sets for a character, okay, firstly, it's good to have them balanced so they're all usable, and so the same content can be completed with all of them in different ways. So obviously, nothing's going to be perfect. There's obviously going to be balance issues, but also I would say it would be nice. It would be very, very nice if you could actually, on a single character, swap between them somehow. And not make it hideously expensive and punishing. Like, I have to play this game for like 5 hours to change build, and that is going to make players resent this game, because that's not fun to do. That's well past the point of being fun. And then you also come up with the argument as well, as well, you're also paying a 5% bonus to get the shards to do the reset for cash. We're not going to moan about that too much today, but that's obviously going to be quite the thorn in the selling of the game's backside, because it smells like something EA would do. And, well, that's it in a nutshell, really. It's just it's now popped this game into that category of some saying it's pay to win. I really don't think it is. I think it's pay to skip, but and yes, I do think the two things are different, because if this was having a PvP and I paid money and I got damage bonus for it, fine, pay to win. If this had a race to get from start to finish and you had an experience bonus, fine, it's pay to win. But hey, small semantics aside, let us move on. So we have issues in accessibility to builds as well. We have issues with the difficulty ceiling. We have issues with just the difficulty having a ceiling full stop. Customization is limited, but again, I would go so far as saying the customization's probably going to be, as much as it's ever going to be, we'll get more skills eventually via, say, the new game mode next week, and that will help a bit with this, because there's actually quite a bit of variety here. One of the problems, though, is that with the armor sets available, is they really funnel you into a specific choice. Once you've got those 3 armor sets, like, you need to use one of those, and once you've got one of those, like, this is the best ability I have now for damage. If I use anything else, I'm a potato. There is no point in using Justice for this. Like, that does a lot more damage and it's AoE. This, okay, gains me a little bit of energy, but this is better. It ignores armor as well, and it's just amazing. Once you've got these sets, they really tunnel you into what you're going to be building, and there is a bit of variation too in terms of passives you can use and things like that, but more skills will help with this. But the armor, I think, is always going to funnel us towards specific builds. Hopefully more armors in the end will help with that, but hey, it's something worth talking about. I would go so far as saying replayability of the campaign might be something to consider too. So the game's campaign length, at the risk of being unpopular at saying this, I think is totally fine. Whoa, I'm sure there's people that have just like, I don't know, click the unsubscribe button, but if it's a couch co-op game, I really don't actually want it to be 12 hours long, or even 14, 18 or more, because if it's a couch co-op game, I think you want to complete it in a session. But then what you need is the ability to complete something else in another session, and something else in another session. And I think that's kind of where this game really would have benefited from a New Game Plus mode, rather than what it's gone for. Now, obviously, granted, all of the issues within the campaign aside, and there are quite a few, the length I don't personally think is one. I think it's the issue of what you do after you've finished it. That's fine. Like, people are playing through D3 right now, and you can complete that campaign very quick, and no one really gives 2 hoots because there's loads of other stuff to do. You will always get some people that's be like, oh, I've completed the game in this amount of time, it's a waste of money. You will always get that for a short campaign. You just simply need to shove it in their face that there's now something else they have to do afterwards. It'd be like, well, you've beaten the final boss, but you're only just getting started. You've got to make it that obvious, otherwise you're going to get lots of these comments. But either way, I think a New Game Plus mode would have been better. Leveling an alt through the campaign that you've already completed is not particularly amazingly good fun, especially when you know everything that's coming. It doesn't get any harder unless you put the difficulty up, and you put the difficulty up, it takes 10 times longer to complete, and you don't get any more experience for doing so. So honestly, I would say New Game Plus mode, probably a good idea. Probably a decent idea. I don't know how to implement it, but it's just a thought. Because, heck, even the fact that you have to do the campaign on an alt, some people won't like. Because you have to do that in order to get access to it. It's either the God skill tree or it's the skill points. I think it's actually the God skill tree that unlocks via the campaign. I'm not sure, but some incentive to replay the damn campaign with a harder setting. Like having the expedition modifiers on a campaign, I think would have been cool when you're playing through a second character. Like, just something to make it more varied. Either way, I think that's coming to quite a few of my major sort of concerns for this. Obviously, I'm taking into account the fact that we're getting new content next week. It's going to give us new skills, it's going to give us new areas and modifiers to do, and some bits and bobs. It's pretty clear what this game needs. It needs more items. I think many will say it needs more customization, but there will be the flip side of those that say it doesn't, because it suits the entry level of the genre, and I think that's more of an issue of marketing. It was marketed as being an ARPG, like Diablo, and yet it is like an entry-level version of Diablo in many ways. Although it's in others, it's probably as complex in terms of gameplay as D3 was at launch, which didn't have a lot of the legendary items that made builds complex until far later. But then I'd argue it had a lot more item stats that actually did make builds a little bit more interesting. You could have lots of life on hit builds and lots of weird janky like resistance builds and stuff like that. I don't think this game ever needs that. personally. I know some people like it and some people will complain it's not here, but hey ho. Now, guys, I think I've pretty much more or less exhausted my stuff for now. Map tile sets I think we'll just need to return to for a second. Like, map tiles, for the love of God. There is only so many times you can step on a tile that is identical before just looking at yourself in the mirror and thinking, what am I doing with my life? Why am I playing this game? And like Act 3 in particular is a beauty. Like when you get to that T-junction that has the chest up on the ledge, like every single map I see that 3 times. And I'm like, come on, man. Make another junction. Do something else with it. Make it, I don't know, but for the, oh my God. I do get that the biomes are probably limited by the story, and I know that new biomes are coming, but the issue is 50% the lack of biomes, and 50% that the biomes are comprised of such a limited tile set that they're so repetitive. And that is an issue. It's an issue for the campaign, and it's an issue for this. And it's not a primary issue, I would say. I'd say gameplay, motivation to play is far more important than maps, but it is still an issue. And it is still a concern. Guys, I think that's probably all I should say for now. We'll see you down in the comments below as to what you think of this, what you make of all of this discussion and hoodoo. This is my feedback, what I think the game will need. I'll tell you what, we'll throw in one more freebie. One more freebie. D3 did this, and it was a good idea. It was simple, and it worked well. Instead of having a regular red, have a decent quality, amazing red with slightly better stats and perfect rolls that drops with a 1 in 100 chance. So that way, players that enjoy grinding and grinding and grinding, granted there's not enough content right now to justify that grinding, like it would be soul destroying to have to like play this for 12 hours to find one of these. Once there's more content, now fine. Once a difficulty and such is addressed, fine. But Primal Ancients worked really well for D3. They worked really well, and they would suit this game because it's minimal time for the developers to create. It's an item with an extra glowy effect around it, like give it a semi-glowy effect like this, but down here, make it look a bit more awesome, and just give it slightly better stats, and make it super rare. We have nothing right now that's super rare to get, and that's probably intentional, but I think it is a bit of a problem. Once there is stuff worth grinding in this game in terms of gameplay and enjoyment, I think it would be a good idea to have some items that are actually harder to find. Guys and girls, you've been listening to Hydra. You look after yourselves, have yourself a great day, great weekend. I'll see you around.